Hey everyone, Tankenstein here. In this video, I'll be reviewing the Challenger 2 OES. This is a currently Tier 7, 11.3 BR medium/main battle tank in the British Ground Forces tech tree. This vehicle currently costs 9,620 Golden Eagles and comes with 20 backups. With that said, in this video, I'll be going over everything that you need to know about this premium Challenger 2 variant, including its stats, how it plays, I'll go over its strengths and weaknesses, I'll give it some scores in several key areas, and then I'll give my final recommendation and if I feel if this vehicle is worth purchasing or not. With that said, if you like this kind of video, please consider subscribing, but without further ado, let's get into the review. Now to start, I'll place the stat card here on the side of the screen. Important things to note are its power to weight ratio, turret traverse speed, and reload rate. Now for how it plays. Well, how do I put this? This vehicle is slow. It is essentially a premium version of the Challenger 2 TES, which as you may know is not only pretty much the heaviest MPT in War Thunder by a pretty good margin, but also has middling engine power, which gives this vehicle a poor power to weight ratio of only 16.3 horsepower per ton, which is about 10 worse than comparable BR tanks. This is not just a big difference, it is absolutely gigantic. This means that you will likely get to battle long after everyone else has already taken position, and will rarely be able to cap a base, let alone flank the enemy. This basically relegates you to sniping duty, as the armor on the OES isn't good enough at the front to be a frontline tank, at least not in your typical matches. Even though at least the cheek armor is pretty decent. It can occasionally frontline when in a down tier, but down tiers are going to be exceedingly rare with this vehicle due to its current proximity to top BR ground vehicles. It's not to say that shots are not survivable with this vehicle, as they definitely are, but the armor is so spread out and heavy relative to the amount of protection that it provides that it is typically insufficient to stop most APF SDS anywhere but the cheeks of the turret, and even those aren't incredibly well protected. This is a shame too, because the reload on the 120mm L30A1 cannon is fantastic, with it being able to go as low as 5 seconds, which would allow it to brawl in short bursts very capably. But again, unfortunately, the armor just will not allow you to consistently be able to brawl like that. If nothing else, you should still be able to go to a sniping spot with this vehicle and use your decently powerful cannon with your Gen 2 thermals that should allow you to hit enemies accurately at range and for the most part be able to kill them, especially at least if you know their weak spots. But with that being said, let's get into its strengths and weaknesses. And first for its strengths. The gunner sight has Gen 2 thermals, which will provide good image clarity. Second, this features a very good reload rate that can be as low as 5 seconds, though of course depends on having ready rack ammo available and you only have 4 shells in your ready rack. For its third strength, this features a top-mounted HMG that will help damage or destroy lightly armored vehicles and aircraft. Fourth, this has access to HESH, or if you might know it as BESH, which can be useful in rare instances. For its fifth strength, the turret cheek armor is typically enough to stop enemy shells of all types, though this is not a guarantee, but for the most part it's pretty decent. Sixth, while the composite armor blocks on the side likely won't stop APF SDS, they will still largely stop Heat FS, rockets, and most ATGMs that hit them directly, which provides a decent measure of protection against helicopters. For its seventh strength, it has a good vertical cannon guidance of between -10 and +20 degrees. Eighth, this features smoke shells, which, they're not typically all too useful, but they can be in some situations. Ninth, this has a commander sight, but unfortunately it only has access to night vision, and no thermals. And then finally, we have premium RP and SL bonuses. Now for its weaknesses. First, this has a mediocre turret traverse rate, though at least it gets up to 31 degrees per second when fully aced, but that requires 2,200 Golden Eagles to pour into this vehicle, as well as over 1.5 million Silver Lions in order to just get it to Expert. Second, this has awful mobility relative to BR. Not only is this about the heaviest MBT in War Thunder, but it's also got one of the weaker engines, leading to a power to weight ratio that is lower than a lot of World War II vehicles. Third, though it looks visually quite impressive, the armor on the OES falls just short of being useful pretty much everywhere on this vehicle that isn't a turret cheek. For its fourth weakness, it has an extremely tall profile profile that will make this vehicle very obvious, even when hiding behind cover. Fifth, there is a huge weak spot in the driver's viewport. Another huge weak spot exists pretty much all around the cannon breech, which is obviously bad because that is right in the front of the vehicle. And finally, there is an absolutely massive rear engine lid that will force your cannon to elevate substantially when your turret is rear facing. This is far bigger than most other MBTs, being even worse than what we see with the Leopard 2. This means that if you have an enemy that's directly behind you, you will not be able to shoot him. Now with all that said, let's get into how I scored this vehicle. For armament, I give it a 6.25 out of 10. Perhaps I'm being a bit generous here, but between the Gen 2 thermals, great reload, and workable armor pen of just above 560mm at max, with its L27A1 APF SDS shell, this vehicle could definitely have a worse armament. While the L27A1 is not the top of the top in terms of APF SDS, it is still more than capable, and when combined with its good thermals, you get a fairly reliable sniper. Once you fire your 4 Ready Rock shells, your reload becomes somewhat average, but it still isn't all too bad. Combined with the HMG on top of the turret that will help to deal with aircraft and light vehicles, the OES's armament is its strongest asset. Really, the only thing that is buoying this category to be above average, at least in my opinion, is its excellent reload. Without that, the armament on this vehicle is somewhat average, or some might even consider it to be mediocre. Now for its mobility, I give this a lowly 2.75 out of 10. There's no way to put this other than saying that the engine is weaker than most NATO engines for MBTs, and the vehicle itself weighs around 10 tons more than most NATO MBTs. Because it weighs so much more and has so much less power, the OES is underpowered at this BR and of course has poor mobility. Its power to weight ratio is barely better than the Sherman 3-4, which is a World War II vehicle, and is much worse than an M18 Hellcat. The OES needs to go on a diet big time and commit to leg day. Now for survivability, I give this a 4.5 out of 10. As stated earlier, the armor on this vehicle is mostly geared towards stopping heat FS and related projectiles, not APF SDS, which is a fairly big issue. Because of this, the OES has literally tons of armor covering it to defend against projectiles that typically will not hit it in War Thunder. As such, APF SDS, which is the primary shell type at this BR, will have no issues killing the OES, except when hitting the turret cheeks, which are reasonably well protected, though still a bit worse when compared to other vehicles such as the M1A1. I don't think that the survivability on this vehicle is legendarily bad as many people would like to claim that it is, but it's average at best and a bit below average at worst. Again, it can defend pretty decently against random helicopter strikes at the beginning of a match, or against stock vehicles with just heat FS, but in most scenarios, your survivability diminishes to a point that is probably a bit lower than your typical tank. The OES pretty much has no strong points outside of the turret cheeks, and has some armor pretty much everywhere, which means that head-on shots will almost always pen, at least again if they're not hitting the turret cheeks. Those shots at extreme angles may have a slightly lesser chance of killing you compared to similar BR tanks. It's a bit of weird armor design, and the British clearly no longer believe in all or nothing armor. Though of course I'm a bit of an optimist, so perhaps 4.5 is still a bit generous in this category, though let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Sometimes when I play this, I kind of feel like it could be a 5 out of 10, 5.25 out of 10. Sometimes I could feel like it could be a 4.25 out of 10, so it's a bit murky here. Now overall, I give this a 4.75 out of 10. Overall, I don't think that this vehicle is absolutely awful, though I do believe it sits below most, if not all, high BR premium MBTs, even just slightly. It has likely the worst mobility of a modern MBT currently in War Thunder, and a weird armor layout that will stop highly angled shells a little bit more commonly than what you might have with other tanks, but has no chance of stopping top level APF SDS shells nearly anywhere, as long at least as it is a direct hit. Further, the armament is pretty good, but not fantastic, and is largely helped by a great reload rate that slows down after fewer than half a dozen shots. Is this vehicle terrible? No. But it really isn't all that good. So, do I recommend this vehicle? Quite honestly, no I don't. At least not so long as it stays at 11.3 BR. As stated before, this vehicle has a lower power to weight ratio than all modern MBTs, and by a fairly wide margin. This is because it is also the heaviest MBT currently in War Thunder, which stems from its excessive amount of largely middling armor that is just shy of being good enough to stop common shells at this BR, namely APF SDS. While you can kill enemies fairly decently decently with the good armament on this vehicle, it just doesn't have the other requirements that would make me happy to be with it. On one hand, it is likely the least expensive high BR premium, as it only, and I use only with quotes, cost 9,620 Golden Eagles, which is less than $50 when purchasing Golden Eagles from the Gaijin store, whereas other premiums at this BR typically cost $70, as most of them are in packs. One could make the value proposition for this vehicle, and I certainly think that's a valid point, especially when on sale. If there is a solid sale, I would say that this is definitely a purchasable vehicle, as it isn't as bad as people say that it is, but I would avoid it otherwise. The Challenger DS is somewhat surprisingly better relative to BR and has very similar RP and SL modifiers, so it will help to grind pretty much as well as the OES while being more competitive at its given BR than of course the OES is. The OES currently sees vehicles that are just faster than it, have more effective armor layouts, and have more powerful armaments, leading to the OES being somewhat of a duck at this BR. It's certainly capable, but it will essentially never win when comparing it to pretty much any other MBT side by side at and around its BR, outside of other challengers. But at least this has the value proposition when looking at it. So no, I don't recommend this vehicle normally, but it can be a decent pickup when on sale. For a comparable BR premium, I would also consider looking at the M1A1HC Clickbait, as it is faster, has a stronger armament, and in my opinion has a bit of a more effective armor layout, plus of course it has other survivability features like more smoke grenades and blowout panels. But with that being said, thank you all so much for watching. If you don't mind, please consider liking, commenting, and subscribing, as it will help for you to see my future videos. But either way, thanks again, and I'll see you all on the other side. Take care, everyone.